Toxic people can drain your energy, challenge your confidence, and turn peaceful situations into unnecessary conflict. But smart people understand one important truth. You don't have to win every battle, explain yourself to everyone, or change people who refuse to change. Emotional intelligence is not about controlling others. It is about controlling your own reactions, protecting your peace, and knowing when to step back. Toxic people often know exactly how to get a reaction from you. They may criticize you, provoke you, insult you, misunderstand you deliberately, or bring up sensitive subjects simply to see you lose control. The moment you react emotionally, they gain information about what affects you. They learn which words make you angry, which situations make you defensive, and which accusations can pull you into an argument. This is why one of the most powerful things a smart person can do is refuse to react impulsively. Being calm does not mean you are weak. It does not mean you are afraid to speak up. It means you understand that your emotions should be managed by you, not controlled by someone else's behavior. When someone tries to pull you into unnecessary drama, you don't have to immediately defend yourself. You can pause, you can breathe, you can think, you can decide whether responding will actually improve the situation. A toxic person may expect you to become angry because anger makes you easier to manipulate. When you become emotional, you may say things you later regret, reveal information you should have kept private, or turn a small disagreement into a major conflict. Smart people understand this pattern, so they create space between the trigger and their response. That space is powerful. Instead of immediately answering an insulting message, they may wait. Instead of arguing when someone raises their voice, they may lower their own voice. Instead of defending themselves against every accusation, they may simply say, "I see things differently," and refuse to continue the argument. They understand that not every accusation deserves an explanation. This is especially important because toxic people can make you feel as though you must constantly prove yourself. They may twist your words, change the subject, deny what happened, or make you feel guilty for establishing a reasonable boundary. If you allow every accusation to become a debate, you can spend hours trying to prove something to someone who is never interested in understanding you. Smart people recognize when a conversation has stopped being productive. They don't confuse being heard with being understood. Sometimes you can explain yourself perfectly, and the other person will still choose to misunderstand you. At that point, repeating yourself only gives the conflict more energy. Emotional control also protects your reputation. When you remain composed during difficult situations, other people can see the difference between your behavior and the behavior of the person creating the conflict. You don't need to convince everyone that someone is toxic. Your consistency, patience, and self-control can speak louder than an argument ever could. This doesn't mean you should tolerate disrespect forever. There are moments when you should speak clearly, establish consequences, or remove yourself from a harmful situation. The difference is that you do it from a position of control rather than uncontrolled anger. The strongest response is often a thoughtful response. Before reacting, ask yourself, is this worth my energy? What outcome do I actually want? Will responding solve the problem, or will it create another argument? Those questions can completely change the way you handle difficult people. When you stop allowing every provocation to control your emotions, you become much harder to manipulate. You stop giving strangers, coworkers, friends, or difficult relatives the ability to determine your mood. You begin choosing your responses instead of simply reacting to whatever happens around you. Your attention is one of your most valuable resources. Don't give it away automatically. Some people deserve a conversation, some situations require action, and some things are best answered with silence, distance, and self-control. Smart people understand that boundaries are not about controlling other people. They are about controlling what you will and will not allow into your life. When dealing with toxic people, clear boundaries become essential because without them, disrespect can slowly become normal. A toxic person may test your limits repeatedly. They might interrupt you, insult you, demand your attention, ignore your needs, or expect you to forgive the same behavior over and over again. If you constantly tolerate these actions without consequences, the other person may assume there is no real limit to what they can do. Smart people don't spend all their time explaining their boundaries. They communicate them clearly and then follow through. You might say, I won't continue this conversation while you're insulting me. Then, if the disrespect continues, you leave the conversation. You don't need to scream, you don't need to threaten. You simply act according to the boundary you established. A boundary becomes powerful when your actions support your words. This also means learning to say no without feeling guilty. Toxic people often become uncomfortable when they realize they can no longer control your availability. They may accuse you of being selfish, uncaring, difficult, or changed simply because you stopped doing everything they expected from you. Don't let guilt convince you to abandon yourself. You are allowed to protect your time. You are allowed to protect your energy. You are allowed to decide who gets access to your personal life. Being a good person does not require you to tolerate constant disrespect. Healthy boundaries also make relationships clearer. People who genuinely respect you may not always agree with your decisions, but they will eventually understand them. People who benefit from having unlimited access to you may become angry when you establish limits. That reaction can reveal a lot. You don't need to fight with someone because they dislike your boundary. You simply need to maintain it. The more consistently you respect your own boundaries, the more confident you become. You stop waiting for other people to give you permission to protect yourself. You begin understanding that peace sometimes requires distance, and self-respect sometimes requires saying no. Smart people also understand that they cannot change everyone around them. They may offer advice, communicate honestly, forgive mistakes, and give people opportunities to improve. But they don't spend years trying to transform someone who has no interest in changing. One of the most exhausting traps is believing that if you just explain yourself better, love someone harder, or remain patient long enough, they will finally become the person you want them to be. Sometimes that never happens. People change when they recognize a problem and decide to take responsibility for it. You cannot make that decision for someone else. A person can promise to change and still repeat the same behavior. They can apologize and then do the exact same thing again. They can tell you they understand your feelings while continuing to ignore them. Smart people pay attention to patterns. They don't judge someone only by their best moment. They look at consistent behavior over time. Actions reveal priorities more clearly than promises. This doesn't mean assuming everyone is bad or refusing to forgive mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. The difference is whether someone takes responsibility, learns from what happened, and makes a genuine effort to behave differently. Smart people don't waste their emotional energy trying to convince someone to become accountable. They accept reality instead of fighting against it. If someone repeatedly chooses manipulation, disrespect, dishonesty, or unnecessary conflict, you don't have to spend your life asking why they are like that. You can simply recognize the pattern and decide what role that person will have in your life. Sometimes the most intelligent decision is not changing the other person, it's changing your access to them. Smart people don't automatically take every negative comment personally. When someone criticizes them, insults them, or tries to make them feel inadequate, they pause and examine the situation instead of immediately accepting the judgment as truth. Not every opinion deserves your emotional attention. Toxic people may project their insecurities onto others. They may accuse you of being selfish because you stopped allowing them to take advantage of you. They may call you arrogant because you became confident. They may say you have changed simply because you stopped accepting behavior that once hurt you. If you believe every negative thing someone says about you, you eventually begin seeing yourself through their eyes. Smart people refuse to do that. They separate useful criticism from destructive criticism. If someone points out a genuine mistake, they are willing to listen. They can admit when they are wrong because their self-worth doesn't depend on pretending to be perfect. But when criticism is designed only to humiliate, control, or manipulate them, they don't carry it around emotionally. They ask themselves, is there something valuable here that I can learn, or is this simply an attempt to make me feel small? That question creates emotional distance. You don't have to defend your character every time someone misunderstands you. You don't have to respond to every accusation. You don't have to prove your intentions to someone who has already decided to judge you negatively. Sometimes people will create a version of you that doesn't exist because it makes their behavior easier to justify. Let them. Your responsibility is not to control everyone's opinion of you. Your responsibility is to know who you are and live according to your values. The more secure you become internally, the less power other people's opinions have over you. You stop needing constant approval. You stop explaining every decision. You stop chasing people who deliberately misunderstand you. And when you understand that, you become much more difficult to manipulate. There comes a point, however, when the healthiest response to a toxic person is not another conversation, but distance. Smart people know when to walk away. Walking away doesn't always mean ending a relationship completely. Sometimes it means limiting contact. Sometimes it means refusing to participate in arguments. Sometimes it means no longer sharing personal information with someone who repeatedly uses it against you. And sometimes it means leaving a relationship that consistently damages your peace. The important thing is understanding that distance can be a form of self-respect. You don't have to stay close to someone simply because you have known them for years. You don't have to remain available because they are family, a friend, or someone you once trusted. History does not give anyone unlimited access to your life. Toxic people may try to make you feel guilty for creating distance. They may accuse you of abandoning them or becoming selfish. They may suddenly promise to change when they realize they are losing access to you. Smart people don't make decisions based solely on promises. They look at patterns. If the same behavior has happened repeatedly, they don't allow one emotional conversation to erase months or years of evidence. They give people opportunities when appropriate, but they also recognize when those opportunities are being abused. Walking away can be difficult because familiarity often feels safer than uncertainty, but staying in a destructive cycle simply because it is familiar can cost you your confidence, time, and peace. Sometimes you don't need revenge. You don't need to expose someone. You don't need the final word. You simply need to stop participating. When you remove yourself from unnecessary chaos, you create space for healthier relationships, clearer thinking, and personal growth. Your energy becomes available for the people and goals that actually deserve it. The smartest response to a toxic person is not becoming toxic yourself. It is becoming more aware, more disciplined, and more protective of your peace. Smart people don't take every negative comment personally because they understand that other people's opinions are not always an accurate reflection of who they are. Toxic people often speak from anger, insecurity, jealousy, frustration, or a desire to control the person in front of them. If you absorb every insult and accusation as if it were a fact, you give someone else the power to define your identity. A toxic person might call you selfish because you finally started saying no. They might call you arrogant because you became confident. They might accuse you of being cold because you stopped allowing them to cross your boundaries. They may even tell other people a distorted version of events to make themselves look like the victim. Smart people don't immediately panic when this happens. They pause and evaluate. They ask themselves, is there something useful in what this person is saying? If the answer is yes, they are willing to learn. If they made a genuine mistake, they can admit it. They don't need to protect their ego by pretending they are perfect, but if the criticism is simply designed to hurt, embarrass, manipulate, or control them, they don't carry those words around all day. This distinction is extremely important. Not every criticism deserves the same response. Constructive criticism can help you grow. Destructive criticism can make you question yourself unnecessarily. Smart people learn to recognize the difference. They also understand that explaining yourself repeatedly doesn't always create understanding. Sometimes a person isn't confused about your intentions. They simply don't like your decision. You can explain your boundary clearly, and they may still call you selfish. You can make a reasonable choice, and they may still criticize you. You can treat someone with respect, and they may still decide to misunderstand you. That doesn't automatically mean you did something wrong. There is a dangerous habit of constantly trying to prove that you are a good person. When you live for other people's approval, you become vulnerable to manipulation. Anyone who threatens to misunderstand you can control your behavior because you become desperate to correct their opinion. Smart people don't live that way. They understand that their character is demonstrated through consistent actions, not through endless explanations. If someone repeatedly misunderstands you, you don't have to chase them for validation. If someone deliberately creates conflict, you don't have to participate just because they demand an explanation. Your peace becomes more important than winning an argument. This doesn't mean becoming insensitive. Smart people still care about feedback. They still listen when someone they trust points out a genuine problem. They still reflect on their behavior and make corrections when necessary. The difference is that they don't allow random negativity to become their identity. They know themselves well enough to examine criticism without automatically believing it. Ask yourself, does this person know me well enough to define me? Is this criticism based on facts or emotion? Is this person trying to help me improve, or are they trying to make me feel small? Those questions create distance between what someone says and what you choose to believe. The goal is not to become completely unaffected by criticism. The goal is to become selective about what you allow into your mind. Some words deserve reflection. Some deserve correction, and some deserve no response. At all smart people know when to walk away because they understand that not every relationship can be repaired through more conversations, more patience, or more forgiveness. There are situations where staying involved only creates another cycle of arguments, manipulation, disappointment, and emotional exhaustion. Walking away does not mean you are weak. Sometimes it requires more strength to leave than to stay. When you have spent years trying to make a relationship work, creating distance can feel uncomfortable. You may remember the good moments. You may think about everything you have invested. You may wonder whether things could become different if you just tried one more time. But smart people learn to judge relationships by patterns, not isolated moments. If someone repeatedly disrespects you, repeatedly violates your boundaries, repeatedly creates unnecessary conflict, and repeatedly promises to change without changing their behavior, you have to pay attention to the pattern. A single apology cannot erase repeated behavior. A single good day cannot erase months of disrespect. A promise cannot replace consistent action. Smart people understand this without allowing guilt to control their decisions. They also realize that walking away doesn't always mean dramatically ending a relationship. Sometimes walking away means reducing contact. Sometimes it means keeping conversations short. Sometimes it means refusing to discuss personal matters with someone who constantly turns private information into ammunition. You can create distance without creating a war. You don't need to announce every boundary. You don't need to explain your entire decision. You don't need to convince the other person that they deserve less access to you. You can simply change your behavior. Stop responding immediately. Stop arguing about every accusation. Stop explaining yourself repeatedly. Stop giving personal information to people who misuse it. Stop making yourself constantly available to someone who only contacts you when they need something. These small decisions can completely change the dynamic. Toxic people may notice the change and try to pull you back into the old pattern. They may become angry. They may suddenly become extremely nice. They may make promises. They may remind you of everything they have done for you. This is where emotional discipline becomes important. Don't allow temporary behavior to distract you from a long-term pattern. If someone genuinely changes, that change will eventually become visible through consistent actions. You don't have to rush back into the same relationship simply because someone says the right words. Time reveals sincerity. Smart people also stop believing that they need closure from the person who hurt them. Sometimes you will never receive the apology you deserve. Sometimes the other person will never admit what they did. Sometimes they will continue telling their version of the story. You don't need their agreement to move forward. Your healing does not require their confession. Your peace does not require their permission. There is freedom in realizing that you can close a chapter yourself. Walking away also creates space. When you remove yourself from constant drama, your mind becomes clearer. You have more energy for your goals, your work, your family, your health, and the people who genuinely respect you. You begin to notice how much energy you are spending trying to manage someone else's emotions. And once you experience peace without that constant conflict, you may realize that leaving wasn't a punishment. It was protection. The goal is never to destroy a toxic person. The goal is to stop allowing toxic behavior to control your life. You don't need revenge, humiliation, or the final word. Sometimes the strongest statement you can make is simply choosing not to participate anymore.